Welcome to Football Game Plan Scouting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Now that the 2021 NFL Draft is complete, it is never too early to take a very early look at the 2022 NFL Draft. And today, we're going to talk watch lists. So some guys from the NCAA and U Sports ranks that you want to keep an eye on heading into the summer. I believe it's a good thing that there is no clear-cut QB1 heading into the summer. It makes for a more interesting and exciting draft scouting process. However, there are a few names that are generating a lot of interest amongst the scouting community. For instance, there's a lot to like about Sam Howell, the quarterback out of North Carolina, who has garnered a lot of buzz heading into the next draft cycle. He is built a lot like Baker Mayfield at 6'1", 225, and has been highly productive his 2 seasons in Chapel Hill. Now, over the past 2 years, we've seen his completion percentage and yards per attempt increase significantly, while also being able to maintain a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, throwing 68 touchdowns to only 14 interceptions. What will be interesting to see for him this year is if he will be able to stay as productive, considering that they lost a lot of firepower at the skill positions due to this past year's NFL Draft. If so, he'll be able to kill any narrative about him being a product of the system in regards to his individual talents. Spencer Rattler of Oklahoma is another name that has been popular so far this summer. The redshirt sophomore is coming off of a 2020 season that saw him go through his fair share of ups and downs to the point where he got benched during the game versus Texas, only to bounce back and lead his team to victory. He started to play much better from that point on and carries a lot of momentum heading into the 2021 season, with Oklahoma head coach Lincoln Riley's penchant for turning his quarterbacks into Heisman winners, Heisman candidates, and high NFL draft picks. It seems almost a certainty that the same fate would follow Spencer Rattler if he can start the 2021 season with how he finished last year at Oklahoma. So it'll be fun to watch him get out there and throw the football around the yard up in Norman, Oklahoma. Now, over at Liberty, the Flames are coming off its best season in program history, finishing with an impressive 10-1 record that included victories over Virginia Tech and Syracuse and a near victory over NC State. And a lot of that can be attributed to their sensational quarterback, Malik Willis. The former Auburn Tiger transfer filled up the highlight packages for a lot of sports shows around the country every weekend with his dazzling play, throwing for over 2,200 yards and rushing for nearly 950 with 14 rushing touchdowns. His live arm also connected on 64% of his passes with 20 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. Now, what's impressive about his game is that he runs a legit 4.4 in a 40-yard dash, so it's a lot of times he's faster than guys that are chasing him and has a legit cannon that can touch every quadrant on the field. We were able to see a lot of splash plays from Willis last year, and the focus for him will be to utilize 2020 as the foundation to build upon in 2021. And if he's able to do so, especially with games this year on the schedule against Syracuse, Ole Miss, and Louisiana, Willis could find himself taking trips to New York for the Heisman Trophy and to Las Vegas for the 2022 NFL Draft. Now, here is a look at some more names to get familiar with at the quarterback position. And remember, this list is in no particular order, so stay out of my mentions. Levi Lewis of Louisiana has a chance to really catapult his draft stock this year. He became a household name last season as the Cajuns became America's team with their stellar play stemming from the upset of Iowa State in Week 1, and can go a long way in putting himself into perhaps day 2 category of the NFL Draft with a big senior season. And you hope guys like De'Aaron King of Miami and Tanner Morgan of Minnesota can have bounce back seasons. Their bounce back will be different for 2 different reasons. King because of an injury that he suffered in a bowl game, which put a damper on such a solid season for him playing in a pro-style offense, and Morgan for his performance as he was one of the highly talked about quarterback prospects heading into last season. The talent is there. Let's see if he can recapture that magic. Desmond Ridder decided to come back to Cincinnati to try to get the Bearcats into the playoffs and perhaps a national championship. He also has a chance to make himself into a potential first-round pick as well. So did Dustin Kroom of Kent State, who showed marked improvement over his 2019 season, and he's back for more with the Golden Flashes. Oregon's Anthony Brown, who transferred from Boston College, proved in the bowl game last year that he is the perfect fit for Joe Moorhead's offense and has a chance to be another one of these wild card type first round picks we see every year in the NFL Draft. One small college prospect to keep an eye on this year is Aqeel Glass of Alabama A&M. He was fantastic in the FCS spring season, leading the Bulldogs to a SWAC championship and Black College national title. To the 6'3", 215-pounder plays a game that's very suited for the pro level. He shows good touch and accuracy on his deep passes while also displaying the ability to raise his level of play situationally. That's third down offense, red zone offense. That's an area where he has gotten better each and every season, along with his statistics at A&M, and he was able to take home the Black College Hall of Fame Player of the Year award after tossing 16 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions in only 4 games. They had a lot of cancellations and postponements due to COVID, but they got to the SWAC title game and he threw 3 touchdowns in that ball game against Arkansas Pine Bluff. There are some fantastic running backs to keep an eye on this upcoming season. Breece Hall of Iowa State and Isaiah Spiller of Texas A&M, they sort of headline the list. Hall is coming off of a breakout season as he was able to build off a strong freshman year by rushing for over 1,500 yards in 2020, averaging 5.6 yards a carry and scoring 21 rushing touchdowns. He's got the vision, the footwork, and the wiggle that you want at the position. Spiller has been as steady as they come for Texas A&M, nearly posting back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons for the Aggies. He went over that 1,000-yard barrier last season and fell just 54 yards short of it as a freshman. Both years, however, he averaged over 5 yards a carry, also displaying a consistent ability as an outlet receiver. Both backs, in my opinion, should be in the conversation as first-round talents at the position when it's all said and done. Looking at some of the rest of the backs you want to keep an eye on heading into the season, Ty Chandler was at Tennessee last year, proved to be an outstanding tailback. He's transferring to North Carolina, should help out Sam Howell in that backfield. Zamir White, someone that just plays a pro game. I just really enjoy watching him run the football. He runs with a purpose, runs with a sense of anger every carry. And also Sir Roderick Thompson out of Texas Tech is someone you definitely want to keep an eye on. He has that innate ability to get in and out of traffic and bounce to the outside and has the speed to hit the home run. A fantastic tailback coming out of that Red Raiders program. Football Game Plan is brought to you in part by Ninth and Lux. Visit the website ninethandlux.com and check out the clothing gallery. Do You Music with featured artist IW in his latest album, Season 2. You can check that out on iTunes as well as doyoumusic.com. Nesby Phipps, Art, Life, Entertainment. NesbyPhipps.com. Grind It Out Fitness. Visit the website grinditoutfitness.com and download the app. Let's take a look at some of the pass catchers that you want to get a jump start on this summer. Both guys here, George Pickens of Georgia and Justyn Ross of Clemson, are coming off of injuries, or in Pickens' case, dealing with an injury. The Bulldog wideout tore his ACL late last season, so his availability will be unknown this year, if at all. When he's out there on the field, he is one of the more athletic and aggressive wide receivers in the country and someone that brings a bit of that Dez Bryant vibe to the position. Ross was outstanding his first 2 years at Clemson before a career was put in jeopardy by a neck injury that sidelined him all of last season. Now, the hope is that all of the injuries are behind him and he is ready to resume a career that had him steamrolling toward a high first-round selection. And hell, he may end up getting there still, as he is super athletic, showing the ability to catch the ball at his highest point and contort his athletic 6'4" frame in many ways to haul in a reception. Both guys will be highly talked about all summer, all fall, all winter, and spring. You can bet on that for sure. Now, here's some of the other talented pass catchers you want to keep an eye on heading into the summer. Treylon Burks is a big physical receiver at Arkansas, and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, 2 teammates out of Ohio State, are primed for breakout seasons. We talked about guys coming off injury. Reggie Roberson of SMU was stellar for the Mustangs, got injured last season, and should bounce back and retake his position amongst the top of the group of 5 wideouts at that position. And some underrated small school guys to keep an eye on. Christian Watson, tall, speedy receiver out of North Dakota State, and Dejon Dixon, who flirted with the NFL draft last year but decided to come back to Nichols and should pick up right where he left off this past spring. And speaking of picking up where they left off this past spring, and also a small school standout, Jequez Ezzard out of Sam Houston State was straight up box office and phenomenal. You talk about someone that averaged over 22.5 yards a catch, which is unheard of. He was outstanding last year and showed that he was big time in crucial moments. Every game we watched this spring, Sam Houston play, Ezzard was making a play on third down at the end of the game, and the kickoff or punt return situations, on end arounds. Anytime the football was in his hands, he was likely to go off for big plays. He ended his season, his spring season, which was his first year at Sam Houston after transfer from Howell, where he went over 1,000 yards back in 2018, averaging over 26.5 yards a catch. He's a big play threat. Capped off that season this spring with a tremendous game in a national title game against South Dakota State. So Ezzard is definitely someone that could see himself catapult into that early day 2, late day 1 range because of how dynamic he is with the ball in his hands. Moving on to the tight ends, and Texas A&M's Jalen Wydermyer has put together back-to-back strong seasons with almost identical yardage totals and 6 receiving touchdowns in both years. His game reminds me a lot of another former Aggie in Martellus Bennett. Wydermyer has the route running chops and the hands to be a top-tier receiving threat at all levels of the field, especially inside the red zone. I think his blocking is above average for most tight ends at that position. I feel like this year's tight end crop is a lot better than what we saw last year, so I think it's a solid group overall. We already talked about Wydermyer out of A&M. Charlie Kohler out of Iowa State is one of the top tier tight ends that we're going to talk about all throughout the year. Trey McBride and Cade Otton, some solid options in the passing game. Cole Turner, Isaiah Likely, guys that splashed as group of 5 talents last year with the uptick in exposure that these programs got because of their fantastic years. Jaleel Billingsley out of Alabama, Isaac Schley, we talked about his teammate Ezzard in the spring. He had a really good year for Sam Houston on both ends of offense. And Grant Calcaterra out of SMU, a guy that's returning from retirement to come back and play. I think he has a chance to really shoot up the draft boards because injuries aside, which were concussions, this dude can legit get down the field and make plays in the passing game. As we begin to talk about the offensive line, we'd be remiss if we didn't stop in at Tuscaloosa and focus on an Alabama offensive lineman. This year, it's Evan Neal, the offensive tackle. He's 6'7", 360 pounds, and not only carries that weight well, he moves rather well also. This dude is a devastating run blocker and shows good hands in pass protection. His footwork and hands are tied together, which lets him dominate many reps out there on game day. And we are potentially talking about a top 15 talent here by the time April rolls around. So keep an eye out for Neal, as he should dominate once again this season for Alabama, which should be another stellar year for offensive line prospects across the board, centers, tackles, and guards. We talk about Evan Neal, but Thayer Munford is another one that has dominated since he's gotten to Ohio State. Myron Cunningham Jr. out of Arkansas has been stellar for the Razorbacks, and Nick Ford of Utah is someone to keep an eye on coming out of the Pac-12. I think he does a fantastic job in pass protection also. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, and 2 of the top tier pass rushers to keep an eye on this year both wear number 5, and that's Kayvon Thibodeaux out of Oregon and George Karlaftis out of Purdue. Both guys affect the game on both ends of defense. Thibodeaux was the number 1 high school prospect coming out and has more than lived up to that billing, and Karlaftis, who has been a stud since stepping foot on campus, dealt with an injury and COVID-19 last year, but as a freshman, he found himself beating the quarterback 7.5 times and also posted 17.5 TFLs as well. They helped spearhead a group of guys up front that have displayed a lot of disruption so far in their careers. And I'm excited to see how LSU's Ali Gay is able to build upon what he did in his debut season with the Tigers, coming in as one of the top JUCO prospects in the country. D'Angelo Malone out of Western Kentucky is an outside linebacker edge rusher at 6'4", 230 that has racked up 41.5 TFLs and 24.5 sacks in his Western Kentucky career. The job this year for us is to figure out whether he's better suited as a defensive end or as a stand-up edge rusher that can drop back in coverage out there on the field. But either way, you want him on your defense. He spearheads an excellent group of linebackers this year. Ventrell Miller out of Florida is someone that could have came out in the draft last year. Glad he's gone back. He's outstanding for Florida, does a great job making those impactful tackles, as well as Nakobe Dean out of Georgia. We had a high grade on him coming out of high school, and I'm excited to see him continue to progress with the Bulldog defense. As we wrap up with the secondary, Derek Stingley Jr. out of LSU has been a top-tier talent ever since he was in high school. He was our number 1 graded prospect in our football game plan for 100 rankings and has lived up to the billing. When you look at the rest of some of these defensive backs, Marquise Bell out of Florida A&M, outstanding safety, as well as Reed Blankenship out of Middle Tennessee State, who could have came out last year but decided to go back and help that Blue Raiders program thrive on defense. And I'm a big fan of Ahmad Smoke Gardner out of Cincinnati. And I'm a big fan of Ahmad Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati, 6'2", 188, one of the premier lockdown corners in college football, and keep an eye out for Zion McCollum out of Sam Houston, another one of these prospects coming from that Bearcat program. He more than held his own all throughout the spring. He's a tall corner that has both instincts and ball skills.